What many people don't realize, the specialist explained, is that inner speech occupies approximately 25% of our waking mental life. That's a quarter of your conscious experience dominated by an internal narrator many people never think to question. Research has consistently confirmed this percentage across diverse populations, making it a universal human experience rather than an individual failing. This revelation struck Sarah with particular force. She had spent her entire career crafting messages to influence external audiences, yet had never considered the impact of the messages she was feeding herself. If we spend a quarter of our conscious life engaged with this internal voice, shouldn't we understand what it is, where it comes from, and how it shapes our perception of reality? Most people move through their entire lives never questioning the authority of this internal narrator, assuming its commentary represents objective truth, rather than a constructed narrative with neurological origins. For Sarah, this realization was both devastating and liberating. The voice that had dictated her self-perception for decades wasn't delivering unassailable truths. It was running on neural pathways constructed during her childhood and reinforced through years of habitual thinking. Those pathways weren't Sarah. They were simply well-worn routes her thoughts had learned to travel. As we continue exploring the science of inner speech, Sarah's journey will serve as our case study, a real-world example of how understanding the neuroscience behind our internal dialogue can transform not just how we think about ourselves, but how our brains physically process and create our experience of reality. Her story illustrates what's possible when we move from being passive recipients of our inner monologue to active participants in shaping it. Why this matters: the hidden power of your mental narrator. The brain mechanisms that created Sarah's inner critic weren't just psychological constructs. They were physical pathways being reinforced with every self-doubting thought. What most people never realize about that mental narrator you've been listening to all day is that it triggers a cascade of neurochemicals that literally reshape your neural architecture. The voice in your head is rebuilding you, one thought at a time. When negative inner speech dominates your mental landscape, something remarkable happens beneath the surface. Your body can't distinguish between an actual threat and the perceived danger your inner voice suggests. That critical inner monologue activates your body's stress response system as effectively as a physical danger, releasing cortisol, the primary stress hormone designed to help you survive threatening situations. This biological reaction served our ancestors well when facing predators, but when triggered repeatedly by your own thoughts, it becomes destructive. Cortisol released during episodes of negative self-talk gradually damages neural connections over extended periods. The microscopic architecture of your brain, the delicate web of connections that forms your thoughts, memories, and personality, deteriorates under this chemical assault. Imagine your brain as an intricate garden. Every thought is like water flowing through this landscape. Negative thoughts carry cortisol, a corrosive substance that erodes the pathways it regularly travels, while healthier connections wither from neglect. The more you water certain neural pathways with this toxic mixture, the more deeply established they become, creating default patterns of thinking that can be difficult to change. This scientific understanding transformed how Sarah viewed her inner critic. What she once dismissed as merely annoying self-talk suddenly took on profound significance. The voice constantly telling her she wasn't good enough was physically altering her brain's structure, creating deep grooves of neural pathways that made negative thinking her default state. But this biological understanding also contained the seeds of hope. The same science that explains how negative inner speech damages neural connections reveals that constructive inner dialogue produces the opposite effect. When you engage in positive, supportive internal conversations, your brain releases beneficial neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine reinforces neural pathways associated with motivation and positive feelings. Serotonin helps regulate mood and promotes a sense of well-being. These neurochemicals strengthen positive neural pathways, watering the healthier plants in your mental garden while allowing destructive patterns to gradually weaken through disuse. This biological process underlies why changing your inner dialogue is neurological reconstruction, not merely a psychological exercise. The implications extend beyond immediate emotional states. The chronic release of stress hormones, triggered by negative inner speech, compromises your immune system. Your body, constantly preparing for threats that exist only in your mind, diverts resources away from immune function, explaining why periods of intense self-criticism often coincide with increased susceptibility to illness. Cognitive performance suffers similarly under the influence of negative self-talk. The stress response impairs memory formation and retrieval. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to remember important information during moments of intense self-doubt? This occurs because your brain's resources are being diverted to handle the perceived threat rather than efficiently processing information. Your inner critic hijacks cognitive resources, literally making you less intelligent in the moment. Attention becomes another casualty when stress hormones flood your system. The brain regions responsible for focused concentration become compromised, creating a frustrating cycle where self-criticism about poor performance actually ensures continued poor performance by sabotaging your ability to concentrate. Your inner voice becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at the neurological level. Conversely, positive inner dialogue enhances cognitive functions by promoting neurochemicals that support optimal brain performance. The same voice that can undermine your abilities can dramatically improve them when retrained to offer encouragement and constructive guidance.